Yeah, we no. Okay. So welcome, guys. I'm seriously sorry I ran into a serious emergency, and then thank God we are back here again. And then I believe tonight we are going to achieve something very meaningful. You know, those who are not here can watch the Zoom recording, and then get to know whatever we are going to discuss tonight. So today I want us to look at analysis of qualitative research. But before we go into that, you know, a little a retrospection of what we did last time. So last time we were able to cover ethnographic research and I think grounded theory, right? So I want to ask you a simple question. When do you choose to do grounded theory? There is some emphasis I made last time, and I want to see if you still remember. When do you choose to do grounded theory? What type of processes or what type of a situation would you encounter and then consider doing grounded theory? When do you consider it important?
Create a theory, so we use grounded theory, I think.
Grounded theory, that we all know, but there was an emphasis I made last time. There was an emphasis that I made that is, I asked you to please note this. This is very important, that this is the kind of thing that gives you justification, or you present as your own justification for doing a grounded theory. Okay, remember it was stated in the paper we reviewed last time, you know, in the slides, that you choose grounded theory, you know, when you have regular repeated processes. Does it ring a bell? Regular repeated processes. That's the best time to choose to do a grounded theory.
What does that mean?
When you have like regular repeated processes, maybe you're working in an organization, you know, where you encounter like regular repeated processes. So it is easier for you to gather empirical data and build a grounded theory out of this empirical data. And I mean, a theory that is grounded on the data you collected, especially in a situation of, you know, regular processes or repeated processes. You know what is repeated processes? Sometimes people say, when you have repeated processes, it's better to automate them. You know, computers are very good in doing things that are automated, you know, things that are repeated. And the human beings are not very good, but sometimes we do repeated things and we can run into trouble and mess them up. But when it comes to repeated things, it is easier to automate. Do you agree with that?
So,
you know, things that,
in ethnography, there is no repeated processes?
Yeah, so grounded theory is a research method of choice, you know, for regular repeated processes. You can go check the video last week and then you'll hear, understand this emphasis
You haven't
again.
uploaded it, Clement.
Yes, I've uploaded it, yeah. So regular repeated processes.
You did upload it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go check.
So when you have regular repeated processes, it's good you do grounded theory. You do ethnographic research when your interest is in what? When do you do ethnographic research?
Like when you study the people in the organization, the culture.
The culture, yes. The culture is very, very important, yeah. And there are different types of ethnographic research. You know, we have the holistic school, and then that deals with the empathy for the group, and then the semiotic school, and where you don't have any empathy. Understand? And it deals more with the participant observation, field observation. You can also use a document, you know, but it's more of field observation. We all have also the case study. We want to study an organization, a unit in an organization for a just short period of time, like in 3 months in an organization. You know, an interview is the best method of collecting data. We also mentioned that, you know, for ethnographic research, it's usually participant observation. You are doing a kind of field study, but you can also collect other type of data, like documents. So much so when you are doing a case study research. When you're doing a case study, you're using interview, collecting, verbal responses from people and recording them, which you will transcribe later to make sense of what you have written, and then you do the coding on the data. You can also collect the documents to understand what people didn't remember about the organization. So the case study is also very, very important. So now today we are going to look at how when you collect all these data from the field, usually you come up with a whole lot of information recorded, and usually before you begin the interview section.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, brother. When will you do a case study? Can you give me an idea about the case study?
When do you do a case study? When you want to study a unit, maybe you want to study people, and then, or when you are interested in a certain unit, you want a unit of analysis in an organization. It could be organizational. Let's say you want to study about customer experience or employee performance. It means you are focusing on trying to understand people. You are studying people. You want to also understand people, but not from the perspective of their culture. And then it's usually, what differentiates the case study from ethnography is, first of all, when you are doing ethnography, you are studying culture. Usually, your research question includes an item of trying to understand culture. And culture are those, unseen realities, questioned assumptions that are, not immediately visible to a case study researcher within 3 months. So there are things, and culture also has to do with understanding how people behave and what are the motivations, things that drives, people's reaction and behavior. So it needs an extended, longer period of time, maybe 6 months, for instance, in an organization to understand. And then for a case study, you are studying for a very short time. You're also studying people. You're also learning from people as you are studying them. And then it's usually for a short period of time. So that's what the difference. And then your emphasis is not on culture. And usually you use the interviews, and then you can also use focus group, like we mentioned, 7 to 12 people, and then maybe 3 focus groups. So also mention maybe 5 to 10 minutes of recording of the focus group. We all mentioned those things in the last week. So they are very, very important, considerations when you are doing a case study. And then we also have a extended case study. Extended case study, you are in the organization for an extended, maybe beyond 3 months, but you are still not doing ethnographic research because you are not interested in culture. But it could be it's extended because maybe you want also gather more data. Apart from the interview, you want to also look at the documents, some important documents. And remember, we mentioned documents last week. For documents, some important consideration is the credibility, the authenticity, the representativeness, and so most are the most factors you consider. Is this document authentic? Is it credible? Is it meaningful? And is it very representative? So when you are considering looking at documents. So in ethnography, you also can lay your hands on documents, but more importantly, you are a participant observer. Sometimes you have to go native, you have to become part of the people, you have to establish some friendship with the people, and then you have to make the people really see you as one of them, So it involves a kind of a reflexivity on the part of the researcher, in order to integrate himself, fully into the group. So we mentioned a lot of things, about how you can use your videos. Always tell people you are going to video, set up things before time if you're going to record, and then let the people know you are recording them, and make sure you know how the instruments you are using, you are very much accustomed to them, know how to operate the instruments. And then usually in a field research, when you're doing participant observation, either a field kind of observation, there's a difference when you are within an organization and when you are a field. There is a field participants observation, maybe observing a local school laboratory and see how students are doing, and then when you're working in an organization, which is much more closed, So these are different types of participant observation you can be doing, and then also gather all the data. Now we are talking about having gathered all this data. from your videotape, from Zoom, and then you are going to do the transcription. Remember that most of these questions are formulated in order to, answer some important questions of interest. So having collected the data, you want the data to speak to you. What is this? What is the data saying to me? What is the meaning of my data? What are the main themes in my data? What do my data contribute to knowledge in my field? Can you see? Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are some of the important questions. And that's why, the research questions for interview has to be clearly formulated, because they're almost like survey questions in a quantitative research. They have to be clearly formulated in order to capture, some important information when you're asking people. So it's not just, that's why it is a semi-structured. We usually go for semi-structured interviews. That structure means beforehand already, you have decided the kind of questions you are going to ask, and the precedence of these questions, which one comes first and which one comes last. So there has to be a kind of order of presentation of your asking your question. And then the questions you are asking, so it is semi-structured. So now, having collected your data, there's need for the researcher to analyze the data. Like for quantitative data analysis, there are methods of analysis, data reduction. In quantitative, usually we can use exploratory factor analysis or principal component analysis. These are ways of reducing data. Try to understand what is going on in your data when you use a confirmatory factor analysis to know which factors, have a higher loading on a particular variable, So it's a kind of data reduction. When you have faced with a lot of variables, in quantitative data, you use factor analysis to see which variables actually belongs to where, to see which ones are loaded more highly on a particular, so that they can be able to eliminate kind of reduction, eliminate what you think is not important or what doesn't fall anywhere. So like in quantitative data analysis, we also do data analysis, data reduction of management in quantitative. So what is the meaning of my data? What are the main themes in my data? And how do my data contribute to my field of knowledge? So, of course, there are many ways, there are many approaches, there are a variety of approaches, including hermeneutics. We are going to see it tonight. I have prepared a beautiful chart, for hermeneutics. Then we're going to see double hermeneutics, trying to understand the parts and the whole. Maybe understanding the individual and the entire organization, or the entire organization and the individual, to understand where the individual belongs within the entire whole. Or when there is a conflict in analysis, usually when there is a kind of confliction in interpretation, you also use hermeneutics to understand the difference between the parts and the whole. And that gives you an idea, or helps you, makes it easier for you to understand what is actually going on. Because sometimes people can be looking at the parts without understanding the whole. So when you have conflicting interpretation, hermeneutics is very, very necessary. Semiotics, study of symbols. And not just only symbols, but they call the text and text analogs, which we'll also see. It's a kind of something that have some level of objectivity. This is what the meaning that people ascribe to this symbol. So you want to understand what is the philosophy, what's the reason behind this symbol. So semiotic is a study of not just symbols, but also analog, text analog. We're going to see that. We have narrative analysis, when you look at a conversation or a written document, a story told by someone, and they want to make sense out of that conversation, either a one-on-one conversation or a story told. That's what it could be, published in a kind of journal, and this story can give a lead or an insight into what is happening in a society, in an organization, or within the life of an individual. So that's the name sounds narrative, So it is a narration of some kind of story. And then the coding, from grounded theory. We have also coding. Coding as an approach to data analysis. We have the hermeneutics, the semiotics, narrative analysis, and the coding. And we mentioned the coding last week, the grounded theory approach of, we have Cobbin and Glaser, and then Cobbin and Strauss. Strauss and Glaser, and then Cobbin and the Strauss. So which one is more popular among the two? Is it Glaser and the Strauss, which are the original founders of grounded theory, or that of Cobbin and Strauss? Which one is the more popular one? And what is the difference between the two? Do you remember?
Sorry, Clement, can you repeat your question, difference between what?
Yeah, remember last time when we talked about coding, last week when we talked about coding,
Yeah.
in grounded theory, where there are two, we have two approaches. This theory, grounded theory method, was actually, founded by Glaser, Glaser and Strauss, and later Cobbin and paid with Strauss to find a better approach. Could you remember the difference between that of Glaser and Strauss and the Cobbin and Strauss?
So I remember there was like open coding, there's exile, and there is
selective coding.
Huh?
Yeah, I want you to like pay attention to most of this.
Coding,
yeah, selective. Yeah.
Yeah, that of Glaser, the original founder, Glaser and Strauss have only three: open coding, selective coding, and then
Exile.
Coding for theory. Understand? Coding for theory, which is the last part. It has only three parts. But that of Glaser, that of Strauss and Cobbin is the one we are using today. It has the open coding, it has the axial coding, it has the selective coding, and then coding for process, which is not used in IX. So that of Glaser is open coding, selective coding, and the theoretical coding.
Theoretical coding? Already?
Glaser and Strauss, open coding, selective coding, and the theoretical coding. Only three steps or three stages in data analysis, in the coding analysis. But that of Strauss and Cobbin, which is the most popular one we are using today, you do the open coding, you do the axial coding, you do the selective coding, and perhaps the coding for process, which is not used. And this coding for process, replaces, if you are doing a grounded theory, then you do theoretical coding. If you're not doing a grounded theory, you use this only three: the open, the selective. You use the open, the axial, and the selective. So these three you use when you are doing your data analysis. So you don't do the theoretical coding unless you are doing grounded theory, like I mentioned it the other time. So in a quant exam, you can say, I'm going to analyze my data using coding analysis of the grounded theory of Cobbin and Strauss. So I will do open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. I will not code for theory, that is theoretical coding, because my interest is not doing the grounded theory. It is only when you are doing grounded theory that you do theoretical coding. If you're not doing grounded theory, then the open, the axial, and selective coding already helps you to understand what is your data, or the kind of data you have. In the open coding, you're kind of summarizing, looking at open codes, searching codes. In the axial coding, you understand the categories that emerge. In the selective codings, you already come up with a main concept or construct that represents the whole idea of what is going on in the data. So, and when you are doing a grounded theory, the emphasis on validity means, how does the theory actually flows concretely from the data you're analyzing? Or are you just making up something and imposing it on your data? So the concepts must come from the data and not otherwise. So we mentioned, so these are the traits of the hermeneutics, the semiotics, the narrative analysis, and the coding. Then from grounded theory. That's why I said from grounded theory. So many benefits from applying some general principles that grounded theories use. So that's what we explained. It can be very fruitful to combine some of these approaches, match the data to the approaches, and it is possible to combine approaches in a consistent manner. Yes, it's, in a very consistent manner, combine approaches. Maybe let's say you can use coding even when you are doing like hermeneutic analysis. That's what it means, that you can combine approaches in a consistent manner, but not methods. You can combine a case study and ethnography at the same time. These are methods. You can't be doing case study as your method of approach to studying whatever phenomenon or the phenomenon you are studying. You can combine methods in qualitative research. You can be doing grounded theory and be doing ethnographic research at the same time. You can't combine theory, but you can combine these approaches to analyzing, because you can use the coding. You can code your data while even you are doing hermeneutic approach. So it's possible to say you use coding to analyze your data, to summarize your data, and then apply hermeneutics interpretation, understanding the double hermeneutics, the understanding between the parts and the whole. So I hope that is very clear why it means you can't combine methods, but you can combine approaches. Is that clear?
So I have a question about the approach. Here is the top down and the bottom up. Is there some kind of similar to like inductive and deductive? Can I
You
say
mean in the
that?
approaches?
Yeah, top down and bottom up. Can I say
Yes.
that like inductive and deductive?
So look at the explanation. Let me open this window.
Yeah, because I'm
when you are
confused.
doing a top down, you already have the concepts from literature. And they are using the concept from literature to analyze the data. It's a kind of theory texting. What is happening in the data? You already have the concept from the literature. You gathered all your concepts, and are using most of these concepts, to understand what is going on, the kind of text, what is happening in the data. So look at it here. A top-down approach, and where was it explained? Wait, let me come.
Or is it more like from like a open coding to selective coding, something?
Or the top-down and the bottom-top approach?
Yeah, because I'm confused by here.
No, the top-down is all about how you are going to handle the data.
Oh, okay.
Yes, how are you going to go about the interpretation? Yeah, let me quickly grab it. Yeah, because sometimes it's good you might need to mention, depending on the type of, because when we are doing all these things, you never, even when we try to study past questions, remember every year they can change their methodology of the exams. So it's good you also pay attention to other things that have not been there or that has not been asked in the past. So that's the essence of doing all this thing. So top down here, means that the concept you are using to analyze data will come from research literature. If your qualitative project is designed to theory testing, top down. So if you're using bottom up, it means that the concept will emerge from a detailed analysis of the data you have collected. So if your qualitative project is exploratory in nature, or maybe on theory building, but mostly exploratory in nature. So if you're like doing a case study and it is not a positivist case to study, if you're doing a positivist case study, then you might say that my approach to data analysis will be a kind of a top-down. You are doing some theory testing and you have of a theory you are testing. Otherwise, if it is kind of exploratory study, maybe you're doing hermeneutics, you want to understand what's going on between the person and the whole within the organization, or conflicting interpretation, because say you are using a bottom-up approach, means, or even in grounded theory, you're also doing a bottom-up approach in grounded theory, because the theory will emerge from the data.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so at least that's very clear. So that's the top-down and bottom-top approach, iterating between the two. Trade-off, depth of analysis versus the number of data sources. Last time we mentioned about the depth of analysis, that is the degree of conceptualization. And the deeper the degree of conceptualization, the higher the theory, the scope of theory you're building. Remember we mentioned that when we are doing grounded theory. So the emphasis will be to have more depth of analysis. And then more depth of analysis, the number of sources you have will contribute to this. Number of sources, maybe going beyond just interviews and also looking at documents, kind of data triangulation. So it also kind of multiple sources for information, because it will help you to get more detailed information if you are relying not only on the interviews or the focus groups. One can also use focus group and also do interview. These are multiple sources of data, so they contribute to the depth of analysis. But there is always a trade-off between them. Sometimes when you have few number of sources, maybe you rely only on a single source, you might be trading off depth of analysis. I mean, when you have a single stuff, you might go deeper in your analysis than when you have multiple sources. So there is always a trade-off, depends on the kind of data you have and what your data is saying to you. So collect more data than you need. It's always important, because sometimes when you end up doing an interview and realize that the question has not been answered, or the data generated more insights that you need to explore. So remember saturation. Saturation, make sure you reach this level of saturation before you call the interview a quit. Yeah, if you interview more people, maybe you have decided to interview like only 100 people, and discover after 100 people you are getting even more insights about the phenomenon you are studying, which means there may be need to interview more people, because more new information, you're getting newer insights. If by the time you interview, maybe you're looking at 100 people, or maybe 50 or 60 people, and then you have reached that point of saturation, which means there's nothing new coming in, you might decide to call it, maybe end the interviewing section, and they might turn to other sources of data collection to gain deeper insight. So we also mentioned coding. Coding is a kind of analysis, assigning a label to textual data and classifying them in chunks. Fundamental task, sampling, identifying themes, building code blocks, marking text, constructing models, testing models. All this happens in the text. And usually when you are doing coding will help you, depending on what, are you interested in themes, like studying themes, building code blocks, marking text, to understand what is going on, constructing models from the data, see the relationship between the different aspects of the information people. You can also construct a model based on the responses you gathered, and also the text models. Testing models, maybe when you are like doing kind of positivist kind of study, where you're doing a top-down analysis, you might be interested in also testing models based on the prior data you have from literature, at least on a top-down approach. So now we are going to see hermeneutics, and then we are going to see semiotics, and then we're also going to see narrative analysis before we go tonight. So we have thematic analysis, the developing teams are developed through coding. This essentially seeks to display graphical relationship between different teams. And then we have memos, procedural memos, focus on the research process. They summarize what you did and how you did it. analytic memos, are the first step in developing concept and themes. Contain hunches and ideas about what data mean. We have analytic induction, a way to develop causal explanation of the phenomenon from one or more cases, analytic induction. Propose an explanation and see if it fits the case. If a case doesn't fit, change the explanation, redefine the phenomenon. And then we have series of events, critical events, and a form of series of events. We have content analysis, a quantitative method of analyzing the content of qualitative data. We have conversation analysis, analyzes the change in meanings that can occur during verbal communication. Bryman has his own methodology of how to go about conversation analysis. So we have discourse analysis, looks at the way texts are constructed and is concerned with the social context within which the text is embedded. So a discourse analysis. And then we have metaphorical analysis, identify metaphors contained in a text. And then social media. All these things are the things you need to be concerned about when you are doing data analysis. Either you consider you are interested in coding, and you may also be using the coding to understand almost virtually most of these ideas. Can do coding coding gives you an idea, a preliminary idea of it, organizes your data and gives you insight of what is your data, what kind of information that you have in your data. And with this kind of information, you might be doing a content analysis. You might be doing a conversation analysis. You might be doing a discourse analysis. You might be doing a metaphorical analysis. It could be even social media analysis. But you have to find a way first to make your data reasonable, because after collecting those huge number of transcripts, you need to concise your data so that it becomes a little meaningful. Isn't that why we do analysis? And often we use softwares to do that. So social media analysis, selecting a quantitative data analysis approach. What do you find interesting? Does it fit your research method? And is there someone who can advise you? So this is qualitative data analysis software, the coders. So it's very, very necessary for memory, coding, searching, retrieving, data linking, display data. We have Atlas TI. I've used Atlas TI. It's very good, for theory building, graphic mapping. Yeah, content analysis.
Yes, I use Atlas TI. So when I see this I was wondering, do we really need to use this one? Because nobody used this one before. Yeah, I mean, in my class.
You mean the
class? Yeah,
software.
Software. We use Atlas TI more. Yeah.
Yes, because it is easier to learn Atlas TI, and then they have open source version, and then or sometimes have a trial period. At least that way, enable you to do whatever you want to do within the semester. When it locks, and then you have to pay to do. And then the free version we have limits the amount of data you can use it to analyze. That's one thing I don't like it. I don't like it. Yeah, you have a serious limit. So it's information it can handle.
Yeah.
So okay, these are the some announcements, some class exercise, in-class exercise. So that's not what we are interested in now. So we just finished reading section 10. So I'm going to go to reading section 11. Reading section 11 updated. This section 11 will be about hermeneutics and semiotics.
So when you take your class, do you have only like one professor with Professor Lauren?
Only one Professor Hoffman. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because when I took my class, we did with Wallace, and we also have Lauren on the side, but normally he doesn't really talk a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
More like a system, we do more with the Wallace. So it's a little bit different from yours. Yeah. So when I read these slides, kind of different. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. This is from Hoffman. So you can agree with me that Hoffman did a very good job. This is his own area of expertise, and he has so much experience over the years.
Yeah,
So
yeah, he's
I'm
more.
proud.
I think
yeah,
he is the one who wrote the slides, Dr. Altman.
Yes, yes.
He was the leader,
know.
so I think yeah, his slides are more complicated. Yeah, I mean
More
complete.
more concrete, and then
Yeah.
very more concrete and very insightful, and then contains a lot of information that you really need to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I have this. Okay, you all have access to this information because it contains some of the things we have mentioned, but in a bit more detail than the slides. That's why I always make reference to this. Sometimes you don't rely only on one source to learn. If you want to make it in CGU, don't rely on one source.
Yeah,
because
but they
sometimes
also create a confused, like mess up too much.
yes, sometimes the slides don't give me much insight, so I struggle to look for other sources that will help me to explain what's going on. That's one of the challenges I faced when I came to the US as a student. In Nigeria, we are used to, from the seminary where I come from, we are used to, detailed work. They give you piles of handouts. The professor prepares his lectures in a handout, sometimes 30 pages, sometimes 40 pages for the semester. And he comes to class and he teaches and grows, but you have all the details, well-detailed, comprehensive information on the handouts. Sometimes they also give you reference textbooks you can buy, but even if you don't buy the textbooks, the handouts are enough for you to get every information. And usually during the exams, the questions come in, a kind of not all this multiple choices question. It's always theory. It's theory. Okay. You have to write in detail. So that was
was that also a doctoral level or master level?
No, that was call it master's level, and even in the undergraduate level where I did my philosophy and then my theology, stood the same pattern. The Pontifical Urban University Roman pattern. Okay. So that's the way most of this. So when I came here to this country, sometimes come to class, the professor will have only 3 lines on the PowerPoint. Only 3 lines, and then she will speak and speak, or he will speak and speak and speak and speak and speak from his own experience. So at the end of the class, I'm left with only the slides. And the slide is not so detailed as to give me the depth of information I want. So either I have to go back and listen to what the teacher said in the classroom, listen to something that doesn't make sense to me. So I struggled with this a lot. That's why today, I always look for other sources to learn. And most of the things I have learned, to this day as a result of multiple, sources of learning, These professors, sometimes there are open massive online courses on the same qualitative research that can even give you a deeper idea than you have here on the slides, So you look for these sources to deepen your knowledge. Because sometimes during the exams, they can come up with confusing concepts. Like I will give you an example, during the quantitative exam, they asked us, design a causal study. But during the classroom, there's no section or team, where you have this a kind of a causal method of designing a research. We never heard about it. No. So the exam was the first day I heard about designing a causal. So I drew from my experience of what kind of statistical approach, can help one to understand the causal dimension, of any phenomenon you are studying. I ruled out, and then we also asked to do the non-causal. For the non-causal, I said, no, you can understand the causal dimension using regression. You can with PLSM. They are very good. You can't predict without understanding the causal dimension. Explaining what is going on there. And explanation is all about, explaining what's the causality. You can't explain what is going on if you don't understand the causal reality or the mechanisms. The realist will use mechanisms, the underlying mechanisms that is responsible for what you're observing, are responsible for the effects, are responsible for the changes, or they're responsible for what is going on, in that phenomenon. So I said, oh, this is going to be good. I can use PLSM, I can use other experimental, like ANOVA. ANOVA can be good. All this experimental can help you to understand mechanisms, and then the causal reality going on. I said, this could be very good. The PLSM can be good for causal research, can be good for understanding the hypothesis, for analyzing your hypothesis. Regression can be good, PLSM can be good, and ANOVA, another experimental statistical method, can also be good. I said, no. Okay, let me use for the PLSM, which the one I know very well, understand, to answer the question for the causal. For the non-causal, I thought since all these other ones can be used for causal, I think the only statistical method I know that can be used to analyze, relationship between variables, that in a non-causal way is correlation. So I decided to go for correlational study, designed for the non-causal, and then use PLSM for the causal. You can also use ANOVA or MANCOVA, whatever, for the causal. It's because these are experimental, So this is how I was able to navigate, through that exams. So there are things you will see that day you have never had before, maybe in this particular course. But if you read other sources, you might, have a very good foundation to understand, be convinced that, like I did my own, that correlation could be good. I was able to justify, that correlation is good for non-causal, because correlation is not causality. So that's how I justified having had for the first time in the exam a causal design. So if you read other sources, you might get also in touch with some other information you may not have here, so that if they twist things, because it was I see it as a kind of twisting by saying causal and non-causal. This is something you already know, just that it came in another way to confuse you. And exam is all about trying to confuse the student a bit, to know how strong he's grounded in his knowledge and his ability to defend what he knows. So things are not going to be very that straightforward in the qualifying exam. It is not going to be straightforward for you to understand. It's going to be kind of, a bit clumsy. It's going to be a bit, confusing at the beginning. But if you know what you know and believe in what you know, you can always, defend your position. And that's why it is always important to say, look at my justification for doing this. And justification is what you believe in. That should be the right approach. No matter how they try to tweak, change words, or move things around, because they will always do that to confuse you. So, so we saw coding. If you read this test will give you a deeper idea, like the Memos, the Analytic Induction, the series of critical events, and Semiotics. So this will give you conversation analysis, discourse analysis, narrative analysis, metaphorical analysis. And then, so this, I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to discuss now. Like I emphasized last time, I want you to pay so much attention. If possible, you can screenshot this part now. This part where I'm presenting now. You can do a screenshot from here, and then always make reference to it. Why I'm emphasizing it is because, remember, there was a time I said, when you are doing a data analysis, your philosophical approach, assumption for that study, whether it is critical, whether it is interpretive, or whether it is positivist approach, that it has to, it must align with the kind of data analysis you will conduct. If you are a positivist researcher, so that's why the consistency of your philosophical assumption and about the knowledge and reality. You see, the approach must reasonably be consistent with your own philosophical assumption. Then if you are a positivist researcher, you can do content analysis and or analytic induction. For positivist researcher, content analysis or analytic induction will be your approach. And then we saw content analysis here, seeks to demonstrate the meaning of written or visual sources like newspapers and advertisements by systematically allocating the contents to predetermined detailed categories. And this predetermined is a kind of top-down. You have categories already predetermined, so they are not emerging from the data. So it's a kind of theory texting. And you know that theory testing, aligns more with the positivist studies. So that's why if your philosophical assumption is positivist, content analysis, for example, could be good for you, because here you are systematically allocating the content to predetermined categories, and then both quantifying and interpreting the outcomes. The researcher searches for structures and pattern regularities in the text and make interpretation on the basis of the regularities. To do this, the researcher develops a set of categories by words or phrases. These codes are applied to units of text. Various statistical techniques can be applied. You see, it speaks more of a positivist language. We also saw analytic induction. In analytic induction, what did we say about analytic induction? Analytic induction, causal explanation. Analytic, a way to develop causal explanation of a phenomenon for one or more cases. Define a phenomenon that requires explanation and propose an explanation. To do this, if it does, then examine another case. Examine the case to see if the explanation fits. So all these are positivists. But most times, most researchers don't use the positivists when you are doing qualitative research. And it depends on what you want to do. Understand? Myself, I prefer interpretivist. So if you are doing an interpretivist research, if you are an interpretivist researcher, maybe your case study approach you are doing, for instance, it is interpretive. You have to mention your philosophical approach. And your philosophical approach must be consistent with the kind of data analysis you are proposing. You can't be doing positivist as a positive researcher and be doing hermeneutics. It doesn't align, not consistent. So as an interpretivist researcher, it's either you do hermeneutics or you do semiotics or you do narrative analysis. This one gives you the flexibility to understand people, to see meaning as it emerges. Remember, the interpretivist believes that reality is socially constructed through the meanings, ideologies, feelings, that people are attached to reality, their beliefs, the emotions, all these things comes into play. And as people try to make meaning about reality. So reality is a construct of the social understanding of the people. And for you to do this, you need some kind of flexibility to understand there's no imposition on the data. Rather, you allow the data to speak to you, allow the data to give you insight what people are responding. Their responses gives you an insight, and you try to understand the reality around them as much as you try to understand, what they are saying. Understanding the different kind of interpretations they give to phenomena, to the reality you are discussing, you are questioning them about, the different disagreements in their meanings and whatever. So as an interpretivist, hermeneutics, semiotics, be very good for you. As a critical researcher, discourse analysis or some form of anti-narrative. So I want you to pay attention. We think about discourse analysis here. Looks at the way the texts are constructed and is concerned with the social context within which the text is embedded. discourse analysis. So which among these methods would you prefer? You might know, you have to be very flexible. It depends on the kind of paper they are going to give you before the exams. And it depends on the kind of question you might be asked during the exam. So, but be very critical and ensure that your philosophical approach aligns or is consistent with your data analysis approach. Pay attention to this. Don't forget it. Have it at the back of your mind. Very, very important. One of the mistakes people could make in an exam is to misalign, this kind of, issue. Misalign, there's a kind of a misalignment between the philosophical approach and the analysis method you propose. So if you are doing a case study, please explain why you are doing a case study, why you thought case study is appropriate for the approach. Don't mention your philosophical orientation in your case study approach. State if you are doing it, the case study as a positivist, maybe who is doing some theory testing. And therefore, you might possibly do a content analysis of the topic or the phenomenon you are studying or the paper you are given. You're going to do a content analysis because you have predetermined the categories already. So you might need to think about that. So mention your method, mention your philosophy, mention the corresponding analysis method.
What do you mean by a corresponding analysis?
That's exactly what I'm stating here and what you have. Oh, let me stop sharing. Let me stop sharing because yeah, you need to see this. You see what I didn't know I wasn't sharing this. So because sometimes I move from one screen to another. So
yeah, I was.
Can you see what can you see now what I'm saying? So this is what I asked you to screenshot earlier. I thought I was sharing. You can screenshot this particular page. Which qualitative data analysis approach? You can't find this in the slides, guys. And this helped me a lot to understand what's going on. And I can assure you that most students don't know this. If you have not come across this paper or this article I'm presenting now, if you have never had access to it, and most of the people, that's why some students have made a positive remark about this study group in the past. It really helped them a lot because having this kind of material helps you a lot because you can't find it in the slides. You can't find it in Wallace's slide. You can't find it in Hoffman's slide. The way it is synthesized here make it very clearer for you to know what to choose when you have a certain orientation, philosophical orientation. So I want you to pay attention to it. Screenshot this screen, keep it on your desktop until when it sinks into you, you can move it to another folder so that you don't make the mistake. So please state the research method. If it is case study, state it is a positivist case study or an interpretivist case study. We want to know your philosophical orientation. And that philosophical orientation is your approach to understanding reality. He said, is the approach reasonably consistent with your philosophical assumption about knowledge and reality? Your assumption about knowledge and reality is the philosophy. It could be positivist.
Question, Clement, if you don't mind. Question.
Yes.
For the positivist researcher. So my understanding when like the positivist thing, positivism, positivism is about testing a theory, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So testing a theory starts from the top down.
Sure,
And
top down.
yeah,
Correct.
the fact is, it's called detective. not in that, like deduction, not induction.
Yeah, that's when you are going on when you are dealing with quantitative research. Here, you don't need to mention deduction or induction. Have you had any word induction? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had
What
such words
about
there?
yeah? What brought it to my attention because it says analytic induction.
Yeah, but it's a different analytic induction is a different approach completely, than in the induction, in quantitative research. Look at analytic induction. It's a way to develop causal explanation of phenomenon from one or more cases in a qualitative research. So it means something different. Yeah, it means something different, but the underlying idea is the same.
Clement, do we have this folder in this file and the share it folder?
It is all there. Yes, it is all there.
Where I can find it? Can you show me, please?
It is there on the folder. It's there on the folder. If you open the qualifying dissertation folder, everyone have access to this material.
Okay, where? Like what folder? What folder?
In the same folder, I have only one folder I share with you. If you open the principal root folder, this paper is lifted. It's stood via. It says stood via. You'll see it there, stood via. It's not in any subfolder. It is on the parent folder I shared. On the parent folder, not on the root folders. Like, I don't want to close this. If I close this, let me continue. It's on the root folder, or I can quickly show you.
We all have a lot of tabs.
A lot of tabs, as in
we open a lot of windows. Yeah, when we reach the doctoral level, so confusing.
Yeah, that's how doctoral students do.
So this is the qualifying exam folder, that I shared with everyone. This is a doctoral qualifying folder. This is the one I shared with everyone. Look at it here. This is a stood via.
I don't have that. I don't have it.
You have it. You have this is the same folder I shared with everyone. You have it. Maybe you have not gone through it to know what is there. I shared there are too many folders and many contents on what I shared with you. So perhaps you've not gone through them. You start discovering most of these things when you go through them. All these things are fun, honestly. It just when you allow them to sink. When you allow them to sink. So that's all about this. Please pay attention to this again, which approach, very necessary, so that you can be consistent with whatever you are doing. And then
Clement, I don't have it, honestly. Do you want me to share with you my screen so you can see what I have?
I think you share is better. Yeah.
Wait. You mean you don't have access to this doctoral qualifying folder? You don't have access to this folder. You don't have access to the Zoom recordings.
Okay, can you give me permission to share? I will share with you my screen.
Wait. You can see me. So if you don't have it, I'm sharing that folder with you now. I think that's the best way to do it, so that and then look at the documents you asked me earlier on. Look at the document you asked me earlier on. I'm also sharing it with you. Everyone have access to it, on the folder. So so I have shared the two, documents you requested. You have it now, right?
Let me see.
I think I can see mine. Yeah. I think
you can see yours. So everyone has access to it. Everyone is all contained in the same folder.
Yeah, I think I can see it now. Yes, yeah, I can see it now. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. So hermeneutics, we are now doing hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is an approach to understanding. It actually originated in the context of understanding the scripture. You know, applied by scriptural scholars in order to interpret, the scripture, the word of God, to understand the meaning between the parts, let's say a verse and also a chapter in the Bible. The Bible, in the Bible, whether it's Quran or, but that's always the way. In the Christian Bible, we have chapters and we have verses. Sometimes if you read a single verse of the Bible, it may not make meaning to you, but when you read the whole chapter, you will have a better understanding of what the story is. And that's why for you to interpret the Bible very well, you need to read the whole chapter and not just limit yourself to one verse and begin to say anything. So you have to understand the particular verse that struck your attention. You have to understand it in relation to the whole story in the chapter. So it actually evolved, out of, interpretation of the scripture. So this an approach of analyzing data, is very useful in situations where there are contradictory interpretations of organizational issues or events. So it helps the researcher in business and in management to understand what people say and what they do. Hermeneutics task, understanding, making clearer what a particular text means. So text and text analog. So when people think, well, there's some kind of obscurity, people, confusion, incomplete, cloudy, and seemingly contradictory issues. Could be in written documents, it could be in a conversation. There is this popular paper I love about the email, how this author applied email to understand using, what is the name of the theory? Forgotten the name of the theory. Richness, information richness theory. Using the information richness theory, the researcher tries to understand what meaning, the email has within the organization. What's the kind of interpretation? Is it a rich medium or it's not a rich medium? What makes it very rich? Is it the medium itself or the meaning that people are attached to, the email? And for some organization, some people will say the email works well for them. So some would say, text messaging or SMS or airtime works well for them. But I think from that research, it is not the medium itself that makes it very rich, but the kind of meaning, the culture that surrounds, the kind of business surface that people do. There's a kind of thing you do within an organization and the email becomes very rich for you. And there is a kind of business you do, the real-time messaging could also be very good for you. So the richness of the medium does not lie on the medium itself, but on the interpretation and that people gives, to the meaning that people attaches to the use of that particular medium. So it depends on what works best for you. So that researcher, or those researchers, like they are more than one researcher, they use the hermeneutics to understand the different interpretation, towards email, and then came to the conclusion it is not a medium, but they believe that people are attached to the use of the medium. So I have a wonderful thing I did, I wanted to publish it on my blog, but I was waiting to have more. I was waiting to, I think flesh it up more before I publish. I call it my own model, I drew from hermeneutics. I drew from hermeneutics to give a visual representation of how you can understand. Okay, look at it here. Can you see it? Can you see
From
my
what you
screen?
got there.
Yes, but not very clear. Yeah. So
Why not very? Why is it not very clear? Okay, let me do the presentation mode.
Yeah, I think if you just maximize.
I'm going for the presentation mode.
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah.
yes, it's better now.
Yeah. So I
I think
read
it's
that
the color you use. Yeah, because when you use the green color with the white text, it wasn't seems well.
Okay, so the green doesn't work well on the white background.
Yeah,
white
because they
text,
are
right?
all light colors, so they looks different. Yeah, that looks harder.
Yeah. So, but at least you can be able to, and then the characters are like very tiny. Yeah. So I came up with this. I call it this my own model of hermeneutic analysis because I read that paper, and then there are some important concepts in hermeneutic analysis. Most of these concepts, I try to bring them, to life here, kind of make it practical, how to understand the text. Here I have the Bible. Could also be an article, but the goal here is to, more of religious than secular, but it could also be used in secular interpretation, So the first is to read the text, continuously move between understanding the parts and the whole. That is a hermeneutic cycle. You see the arrow, you read the part if it is a chapter, you read the chapter, you read the verses, you read the chapter, you go back, and even can go beyond the particular chapter to understand the whole book. So it is kind of a continuous iteration between the parts and the whole. And when you have gone through this stage, then you begin to, go to another level of appropriation and enactment of meaning, appropriation and enactment of meaning. Appropriation here means making the text your own. And then enactment of meaning is what does the text speak to you. But here, like what I'm saying here is more of the religious, more of religious focused. So I will do further explanation with this. We have to focus more on hermeneutics approach in qualitative research. But this visual can help you to understand better the different terminologies that goes with hermeneutic analysis. So here is the applying the hermeneutic cycle, and then you appropriation, making the text your own, and then enactment of meaning, allowing the text to speak to you. Then you do the abstraction of the meaning of the text and reflect and get more inspiration. And then think about the social problems and practical contextual application. This is more of like religious. Let me bring you to another one I designed that is more particular to the one that is more focused with the qualitative data analysis approach. So I just want to show you this. So look at the second one I'm going to share with you now. Because I love hermeneutics, that's why I took this time to do all this. So you see this?
Yes, we can
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did this. So I said, if anyone want to use this, give me the credit.
You done it by yourself?
Yes.
Nice work.
So this one is not for your research, right? Not your.
It's not even for my research. I did this when for the previous students I tutored in this workshop. The last set of students. So I came up with this to make it easier for them to understand the whole concepts that goes with the hermeneutic, because hermeneutics is one of the favorites, methods of analysis because of its flexibility with interpretive. Understand? Every qualitative researcher, mostly, I don't think there is so much theory testing with qualitative research. People really want to develop new theories, You know, so the interpretivist approach is more appealing to many researchers. And if the interpretivist is more appealing, then what it means that hermeneutics is the analysis of choice among many researchers, because it gives you that flexibility with your interpretivist approach. So that's why I have to focus more time to do this. So you have the book here, and you have the scan. You're trying to understand, to search for things. So these are important concepts you have to know about. You will see them in the slides. You know, I also see them in that text we're using. So here we have autonomization. The text takes a life of its own, despite distanciation. Distanciation means separation in time between the text and its author, original audience, and originating culture. If you say something or you write something, okay, assuming the original writers of the Bible we are reading today, nobody talks about who wrote it again, or any religious text, you know? So the moment you put out your own writing there, your own publication out there, there is this kind of separation in time between the text and its author and the original audience and originating culture and society. Because the Bible makes meaning to our own culture today, informs our lives today. The article you published, you know, there are a lot of articles that were published in the 90s and in the 2000s, like the Youth Out or whatever, when they were published, but they still affects what we do today. We still use them today. Those texts speaks today. Nobody talks about the author again, or nobody talks about the context in wherever they wrote it, and so. But the text and then the way we see the text today. So in every culture, people will have a different approach. Like in the management sciences, they might have a different approach to the youth out, and in the IX, they might have a different approach. If the approach happens to be appealing to psychologists, they might also use it in a different way. It means something different to people, you know, independent of the regional culture of the writers, you know, independent of the time, independent of the text, the original audience. So you maybe you addressed something to an audience in CGU today. So even in the next 10 years, people in other schools might be reading the same article you wrote in CGU or the speech you delivered in CGU, you know, without even, they may not understand because your text may not talk about the background or the culture of the people you were addressing, but it makes a whole new meaning to the people who are reading it in present time. That is the distanciation. Then the autonomization means that the text takes a life of its own, despite the distanciation. The moment you put out something there, the text, you know, has a life of its own, independent, you know, independent of you. It has a life of its own. You have put it out there. Sometimes that's why there are things you cannot revoke. You know, there are things you cannot revoke. You have put it out there, is that you have published it. It is out there. So despite the distanciation, you know, this separation in time, the text have a life of its own. And this is much more relevant, you know, when you look at the scriptures, you know, the Bible, the scriptures. It makes more meaning. How people can interpret the Bible today, you know, independent of the culture, and how this Bible, you know, each book in the Bible, you know, means, you know, stands out, you know, have a life of its own, you know, addresses people in their own context and in their own culture, you know, irrespective of the original author, whether it was written in Hebrew, among the Hebrews in, you know, before Christ or during the time of Christ, you know, that kind of thing. So that is autonomization. Autonomization. Then we have appropriation. The reader makes the text, you know, the reader makes the text and that used to be alien. Maybe at the beginning you read the material, it doesn't make sense to you. And then by the more you go deeper and deeper, you know, in your reading, in your analysis, you know, applying the hermeneutic cycle, you know, when you begin to discover deeper and deeper meaning, that's why you have to look at the parts and the whole. Because you see, today, what people usually do is, there is this author, Nigerian author, Chimamanda Adichie, he says there is a danger of a single story. danger of a single story. You want to interpret a people's culture, you're looking at the culture from one perspective, maybe the negative perspective or negative angle. You do want to also look up, or you try to interpret what somebody said, maybe a researcher said, you know. You don't want to understand the whole part, or you're studying an organization. And then when you're applying hermeneutics in the context of organization, it's like understanding the different parts of the organization and the whole. How is the entire whole integrated? So in as much as hermeneutics is used for textual interpretation, it can also be used beyond textual interpretation to understanding the different parts and the whole of an organization, especially as regards a particular, a unit of interest. Like I told you, the author studied email within that organization. So that is the unit of analysis. The email is their unit of analysis, So within that organization, and understanding, the different reactions and the meaning the email has within the parts of the organization, the individual, and the different whole. So by appropriation, the text that is hitherto alien becomes meaningful because you have made it your own. Like people will read the Bible today and make it part of their life. They swallow it. It is the word of God. They swallow it line, hook, and sinker, and they live their life according. It becomes part of their life because they appropriated the message. It's no longer a message written by somebody before Christ or thousands of years ago. It is now their own message. And they see them, they go out, they begin to preach to people. Repent, believe in the word of God, do this, live your life rightly, and this and that, because they are no longer referencing the chapter of the Bible. It is now the life they are living, and that's the appropriation. When you take up a text, you read a text and you simulate a text, and it becomes part of you. And usually when you see, people who are very knowledgeable in a particular field or course, they have assimilated a lot about the course, so that when they teach, I remember those days in school, I have this teacher, he doesn't come to class with any slides or any book. Everything he's teaching is in his head. When I was doing in my secondary school in Nigeria, he's a biology teacher. He doesn't come to class with anything. He just walks into the class. And he will teach for 45 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours. Every topic is already, he has had years of experience teaching biology, such that everything has become part of him. It's an example of appropriation, And then we have social construction. Socially constructed reality or the world, which the meaning of the text is a manifestation. There is always something out there in the world, that this text represents. Remember, hermeneutic cycle works with interpretivists. Interpretivists believe that reality is socially constructed. There is something in the text that have some reference to some social reality. It makes reference to some social reality, the reality of the world, meaning of the text. Like sometimes when you read the Bible, the word of God, sometimes this text addresses some concrete human experiences. And in a research work also addresses some concrete experiences, either within an organization. So there is something about the text that the authors observed about the social reality that the text they have in the article represents. So the text manifests that idea. The text manifests the idea of that social reality. So that is about social construction. And then finally is the enactment of meaning, understanding the problem better. Understanding the problem better. So that's all about autonomization, distanciation, appropriation, social construction, and the enactment of meaning. I don't think you can understand it better than it is presented here. So
Yeah, since it's the cycle, so it just go back to the
No, it's
the
not.
destination.
What is the only thing that is a cycle here is the hermeneutic cycle, going between the parts and the whole. These other things are not cycles. They are just concepts about hermeneutics. The things you have to, note when you are doing, you have to mention most of these terms if you are doing a hermeneutic approach for your analysis. What is constant and recursive here is going between the parts and the whole. You continuous, recursive approach, between the parts and the whole, between the parts and the whole, to understand, because you are using this to understand because there is a confusion, there is some inconsistencies, there are some misinterpretations. So you are going back and forth between the parts and the whole to understand the whole image. And while you are doing that, you keep in mind most of these concepts. So these concepts are not, they are not like a cycle where you have to go before automation. After automation, you do distanciation. No, what is the cycle here is the parts, going between the parts and the whole. But this, yeah, these different themes represents, what happens, as you are trying to understand the parts and the whole. Remember that the text takes a life of its own. Remember, the distanciation, that, there's a separation between the author, the original audience of the culture. Remember that you have to appropriate as you're going back and forth. Remember that the reality they are discussing in the text has some social, embedded in some social reality, which the text represents. And then your whole goal is to kind of understand, what is going on better, So the hermeneutic cycle is going back and forth, taking note of these different concepts, I have to stop sharing now.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Interesting.
Yeah, I took time to do that.
So when you work in the church, are you the one on the stage to talk?
You can. Yeah, sorry to stop you. You can stop the recording.
Yeah, I'm the priest at the stage. I always preach every morning. I teach people and then do the service. That's what we do as Catholic priests.
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
yeah. So, Mohammed, you want to say something?
Yeah, you can stop the recording. Just.
Okay. Let me stop the recording. Okay. Let me just pause. If you mean I should pause. Now.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
So hermeneutics can be used for written documents, for conversations, for non-verbal communication, for audios and videos and organizational culture. So these are in historicity. Be aware of the historical context of the people. The hermeneutic cycle is a dialectic between understanding the text as a whole and interpretation of its parts.
So you are not sharing the slides.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. In which the descriptions are guided by the hermeneutic cycle, the dialectic. It's a kind of dialectic, understanding the text as a whole and interpretation of its parts, moving back and forth, between the whole and the part, unfolding levels of meaning, record, So fieldwork is complete when the researcher resolves all apparent contradiction. When you have resolved all the contradiction, then the fieldwork is complete when they're using the hermeneutic cycle. So you have to read some of these things, the prejudice, attempt to understand the text always involves some prior knowledge or expectation. People already have their own cultural understanding and prior knowledge. So sometimes they try to impose it, on the text. So the researcher instrument is the researcher. So we need to become more aware of our own views and biases, to a large extent determined by our culture and personal history. So avoid prejudice, tradition and culture customs, what people were taught, what they grew up with, So it also affects their interpretation of, trying to understand, using a hermeneutic analysis to understand what is going on. This autonomization, we have expressed it, distanciation, and then appropriation, engagement, So all these things. So types of hermeneutics, we have pure, objectivist, postmodern, critical, double hermeneutics, depth hermeneutic of suspicion. Assume that the surface meaning of the text hides, but also expresses a deeper meaning. So the goal is to, deeper, go into a deeper. I mean, the double hermeneutics here recognizing that social researchers are subjects, and they are just as much interpreters of the social situation as the people being studied, So you're interpreting the social situation and also interpreting, understanding the people you are studying. So the context is very important. Remember, when you're doing interpretive studies, when you're doing qualitative studies, the context is very important. So you're understanding the people in their own cultural context. So you are the researcher trying to understand the social situation of the people in which the people are embedded in, and also understanding the people being studied. So it's kind of double hermeneutics. So fusion of horizons. A hermeneutic researcher usually starts out with some kind of theoretical framework that he or she wishes to explore within the context of a company or situation. So a potential disadvantage of hermeneutics is that many of the seminar texts are difficult to understand because of the inherent philosophical nature of the subject. Most of the physical seminar texts are difficult to understand. They might have been written in another language, because this interpretation, usually like in the Bible, when they want to understand the Bible, for you to understand the Bible very well, usually we have scripture scholars who go back to understand the original language in which the text was written. That's what is meant here by seminar texts. Imagine some Shakespearean, narratives, some Shakespearean stories written in the, I don't know when, thousands of years ago, hundreds of centuries ago. You see the way of the Shakespearean English, the way it sounds. Maybe you want to understand an idea, and this idea originated, hundreds of years ago, and you happen to get in touch with the text. It will be difficult to understand the expressions and the language of that time. So that's the disadvantage, of hermeneutic analysis. So, okay, other things, other ones are like things, class work. So I have to close now and close. Okay, let me close this. So, and then we're going to, this is 11. We have some study guide questions, which I think our explanations will take care of. And then we have we just finished 11, so I'm going to 12. What's going on? Why is this not clicking? Is my computer frozen now?
So which year is that, your Mac? Maybe it's getting old.
2015.
2015. Oh, it's a little bit older.
Is it slow? Is it slow or fast?
No, it's not slow. I trust this Mac. Maybe something something wasn't going on well with me,
Okay.
Do you know, Clement? I think
wait, I was one wrong. But it's not a computer. Understand? I was clicking on the wrong source. Understand?
Oh.
I was clicking the wrong, because I trust this computer very well. It doesn't disappoint me. Maybe if you want to buy me a new one, good. Macs are expensive. Someone gave me this one as a gift.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So we've seen the coding, we've seen hermeneutics. So we're going to see narrative analysis now and then semiotics. Okay, trying to mark time. Overview of narrative. Of course, narrative is a unique story. It has a sequence, it has a theme, it has a main point. It can be about a person, it can be about an organization. It can be told by about one or more voices. It can be created by a researcher. There can be competing narratives. So in contrast to a chronology, it communicates the narrator's interpretation of this, or the reason for telling the story. So in IX, the focus of narrative analysis has mostly been on understanding language, communication, and meaning among system developers and organizational members. You see, so making sense of what happened and to what effect. Stories have an intended effect. People perceive their lives in terms of continuity and process. A time period of a story can be significant, an incident, a project, a career. So it's all about telling story, understanding language, communication among people within an organization. So your write-up can be structured as a kind of narrative, telling a story. you know, and an interesting and engaging one. So ways of collecting data, you know, interviews, transcript, you know, field notes, and then ask people to recount their stories, then what happened. An interviewer or narrator construct accounts of connection between the events and the events, you know, and the context. You know, usually requires follow-up questions. You know, the models of analyzing the data, you know, we have most of these, you know, which you might need to Chapman on web. The articles are out there for you to read. And then approaches to narrative analysis, organizing and presenting the data, writing, telling the story, reading, interpreting the story. Other of analysis could be top-down, from whole to parts, deductive, or bottom-up, from parts to whole, interpretive. This also gives you an idea of the top-down approach in narrative analysis. You know, all these things are like the similar ideas going on here. Top-down is deductive, and then bottom-up is interpretive. You know, ethnographic
okay. Now I
approach.
see. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So you can also
Deductive.
apply it in the order of analysis of a text. So if you're using narrative analysis, you might also need to mention, you know, you are this order you are going to use. So types of, we have realist, assumes one-on-one correspondence with narrative and events as they are described. We have constructivist, created, we have critical, forced to change in the narrative analysis. So if you're using a narrative analysis, mention all these things. Mention your order, mention the type, your approach, you know, whether it's something you're creating or something you assume there is a correspondence within the reality or it's a critical force to change. We have different genres, you know, written different styles, habitual, recurrent event, hypothetical events that did not happen, kind of fiction, topic-centered, thematically linked snapshots. So researcher voices, you know, narrative strategies can be used within any research method, authoritative, supportive, and interactive, can be used in any research method, the voices. Sometimes most of these things, you don't need to mention them in the qualifying exam. We have anti-narrative and postmodern anti-narratives. So multiple approaches to deal with fragmented, nonlinear, incoherent. These are the anti-analytic. So, so all these things, the rest here are classwork. So I have to close. I close this. And then I go to section 13. Section 13, reading guide, update. I don't know if you have, okay, getting published. But before I go to getting published, I think we didn't look at semiotics. Did we? We didn't. I don't know if the slides are there. It looks like the slides.
Clement, there is this chapter missing.
Semiotics.
Yeah, not only this one, there is other one too, the writing up.
Yeah, no, the writing up is the one I just opened and closed because I want to look at semiotics before going for writing up. I've not finished, understand? So I wanted us to look at briefly at writing up. You know already what writing up is all about. So you're doing a research work without writing is like wasting time, and you need to publish on time. You know, we are going to come to that. But if without even looking at any document, you already know what writing up means. Doing all the research without writing up is like useless. You need to put out your work there. The world needs to hear what you are saying, your opinion. You have to inform other researchers based on your findings. If you delay in writing, well, your study might become anachronistic. That is, it may not be useful, you know, within the time and the period, you know. So semiotic analysis is primarily concerned with analysis of signs and symbols and their meaning. So semiotic is concerned with the understanding everything, you know, taken as a sign. Therefore, words, images, and objects can all be studied as signs as long as they have been recorded in some way and can be studied. In business and management, the greatest use of semiotics have been in marketing, consumer research, and information systems. This is because of the pervasiveness spreading of signs in marketing communication, brand names, logos, advertising, and the importance of information in informatics. So, like, it's all about studying science, and I think we have a slide. I don't know, I have a slide with Hoffman, you know, more detailing on semiotics. Let me check at this section 12 again, where we have hermeneutics. or this section 11, a reading guide. It has kind of a more detailed information about semiotics. This is hermeneutics and semiotics. Let me check if there or something is missing. Okay, yeah, maybe I skipped something. So overview of semiotics. So semiotics is primarily concerned with the analysis of signs and objects and their meaning. So Meyer uses the term symbol in his book, but believe that a sign object is a more general term that includes symbols. So we have talked about signs and the sign objects that can be studied not only in language, both in written and spoken form, but also in ritual, cultures. Like when you come to the church, in the Catholic Church, for instance, or most of the churches, or most religious tradition, you have a lot of, semiotics. You have a lot of symbols, images that represent a lot. Among the Christians, we have the cross of Jesus Christ, which is a symbol of salvation that, that God gained for humanity. So it means so within the religious culture, the cross means something. So if you are studying the symbol of the cross, you have to go back to, Calvary narrative to understand what really happened. So, so mostly, symbols are very, very much part of religious traditions. But it also happens in marketing, like we mentioned earlier, logos, brand names, and all the rest. So everyone goes, so you're starting a business now. The first thing is your logo. I remember when the Nokia people started their Nokia, it's usually the hand of two people coming together to meet. That has a symbol, that symbol of two hands. You remember the old Nokia logo that runs through during the startup of the phone? You remember? So it has to be contextualized. Semiotics is concerned to uncover the hidden meanings that reside in texts. So you think about a sign, something that represents something X, and then the signifier and the signified. A sign must have a signifier and a signified. Both are needed for communication to take place. Sign is like smoke, signifies, fire, the object. So this idea of the signifier, the sign and the signifier is very, very important in understanding, semiotics. So we have also sign objects like icons in the symbols, like CGU flame, it's a symbol. So so remember the sign and the signified. Levels of meaning: pragmatic, semantic, and then syntactic meaning. So these are different types of analysis. Syntagmatic analysis, paradigmatic analysis, polysemy. These are the different approaches to analyzing, symbols and the texts, other things that represent, can be studied as semiotics. So there are some examples you might need. So this is a classwork. That's all about semiotics. So I want to quickly finish with writing up, and then we are going to look at the charts that gives you an overview of the entire research methodologies and approaches to analysis. So writing up, getting published, what do we need to know about this? Okay, this is a classwork. It is easy to underestimate the importance of writing. Previous example provide a template about how to show the fallibility of writing process. Writing plan before starting a research project. Writing style, writing journal, very important, and realist approach. Usually objective and authoritative. Confessional, kind of a confessional tale adopts the highly personalized, self-absorbed style of writing. Impressionist, focuses on recall experiences. These are the different genres of your writing, and then requires this one requires an author to be a novelist, impressionist. We have the narrative, writing a story. We can be literary, use of fiction, can be jointly told, co-authored researchers. So practical tips for write, start writing up very soon, work on writing the first paragraph or two. This applies to any research, write a good story. Data selection is very important. Get the details right the first time. Use a software, reference management software, very important, like Zotero. I use it a lot. Look at mine. You see my Zotero? I love it a lot. Without it, I think I would be messing up with my citations. This is my Zotero. If you need how to learn Zotero, how to use it, you can chat me up anytime. Then I tell you, I'll give you a concretely how you can do it because I've been using it extensively. So I know how to go to get around, it, how you can add the books or web pages or whatever, And how you can also manually change a lot of things in Zotero because sometimes it doesn't give you citation, the way you want it. What?
You done your book with it?
You see, that what I showed you was my research, my dissertation proposal with directed readings. That's all the books and the papers I'm reading. This is how it's organized in my Zotero. Look at the dissertation articles. The dissertation article. I also have to. Yeah. So that's why it asks you to use a reference management. It helps you a lot.
I feel crazy.
What?
So much.
What do you say?
I feel crazy. Too many of them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
With Zotero. Yeah.
Yeah, you need it. Once you're a PhD student, you need to learn it. You don't have any option. You don't have any choice.
Because we have so many papers. Yeah, I just feel.
Yeah, you don't have any choice. Like I said, you don't have any choice. You must use it.
Yeah.
You must use it. So, you can read more of this paper to understand about if you want to gather more information about writing up. So.
Can you do me a favor, please, if you don't mind?
Okay, so whatever you say, while I try to grab, unfortunately, I didn't know why I didn't get it ready. There is
No. Can you go to your Canvas website, the Canvas website, the one you was before a minute ago?
Canvas website.
Yeah, it just was there a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I get on session 12? Section 12, yes. Yeah, can I get the guided answer key, the first one?
I usually share them, but we don't have time. No, it may not make meaning to you because these are based on some of the papers they read in class. That's why I didn't want to share them. They are based on the papers. Yeah, they are based on class work, so it will not make any sense.
Can I get it or no? Can you share it with me or no?
You wanna get it? Okay, let me
you can send it to me in Zoom if you would like to.
Yeah, so okay. Okay, I have the key guide here. Okay, I will grab it. I will send it to you later at the end. I'm searching for, there is a document I'm searching, where we have, I didn't know I should have grabbed it before now. When we did a comprehensive analysis of all the different research methods and when you can use them. I don't know whether it is in, no, not in this. That's my bad. I should have gotten that paper before now. Fall class, where did I have, what is spring? Not here.
So, had we finished the quantitative research yet? I think that's the.
We are done with the we are done with the qualitative research. We are done with the qualitative research. Yeah, we are done. Any other information? If you need them, I've shared this already with you guys, right? You already have this comparison of qualitative research methods.
You have it already. 2 weeks, yeah. So I'm kind of trying to. How are you getting on with the classwork? I mean, other courses you are taking in this semester. My own, I'm just surrounding. I thank God. The presentation. Yeah.
What we're gonna study next week? Like we're gonna start the
Design science.
design?
Design science.
Design science?
Yes.
Is that the same as the research design or different?
It's another IX approach.
So what we done the qualitative, we done the quantitative.
So look at what I'm searching for here. We are doing the quantitative way. We done the 501, 504, 503. We are just running up tonight. We are going to do the 505, the design science research.
Oh, okay. So research design. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen. Yeah, I don't know how, if this is going to be very clear because, yeah, I wanna see how it can be very clear from your end. Let me resume. I hope I'm still recording.
And also, I don't see there is a material for the design science has been uploaded yet.
Materials there, we're gonna grab them from the canvas. We're gonna grab them from the canvas. So, I don't know if this is going. If this is not too very clear to you, you can. I don't know, because this was a screenshot from the class. I don't know if I really have an original copy open with other maps. So they said the what we have here, it may not be very clear from your own end. So these are the different research methods and them. So for the hermeneutics, hermeneutic research emphasizes subject interpretation in the research, of meanings of texts, culture, social phenomenon. Then semiotics, research approaches science as existing in various forms, pictures, words, letters, objects, gestures, and the rest. Explores the content. Then the narrative analysis method is used to analyze content from various sources, such as interview, respondent observations from the field or surveys. It focuses on using the stories and experiences shared by people to answer the research question. The semiotic analysis here, explores the content of science, their use and formation of meaning of science at both the level of a single sign and the broader system and the structures that form the science. Hermeneutic analysis, a variety of approaches and methods to analyze, as well as discipline-specific methods to interpret phenomenon. The focus and goal of hermeneutics is focus on meaning, especially textual data. Semiotics focuses on analysis of signs and symbols and their meaning. Narrative analysis focuses on history, story of the subjects. Process method. For hermeneutic analysis, you can use case study, grounded theory, ethnography. For semiotics, you can use case study, grounded theory, ethnography, or even ethnography online. For narrative analysis, you can use case study, grounded theory, ethnography. The pros. For hermeneutic analysis, require researcher to analyze the organization in various perspectives. For semiotics, enabling researcher to use several types of data, symbol, image, music. Narrative analysis, in-depth, context, how. That's the pros. And the cons is, for hermeneutics, it is hard to specify the end of the process for conclusion. For semiotics, you rely on the insights of the researcher. For narrative analysis, hard when interviewing many people. Outcomes of finding, engagement with for hermeneutics, engagement with or appropriation of the data. For semiotics, understanding of the cultural myths and symbols. And then narrative analysis, example, the narrative or the story. That's the outcome, So this some of the comparison. If I find something better, there is something more I'm still using, I'm still looking for, I will share it with you. Yeah, I will share it with you. Ethnography, case study research, action research. So that's all, for what we have tonight, guys. Sorry, I missed almost an hour.
No problem. Yeah, it's okay.
But thank God we're able to, get something done tonight.
You can't stop.
I regret.
You can't stop recording.
Okay. Stop sharing, and then
for the quantitative research, but do we have the prediction? Yeah, like a predictive in qualitative.
Nobody talks about prediction in qualitative. Nobody is talking about prediction. We're talking about theory testing.
Oh, okay, theory testing. Okay.
Yeah, theory testing. Just if you have a theoretical framework and you are doing a top-down analysis approach, which means you have some concept from literature you want to use to text the data you gathered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, based on the theory. So this concept from literature are maybe concept from an existing theory. Okay. And then you are texting the data you have to know if the data agrees with the theory or whether it refutes the theory. Okay. So that is a positivist type of research. It could be a positivist case study. Otherwise, you allow the theory to emerge from the data. That is bottom top interpretive, approach. So nobody talks about prediction in qualitative research. Yeah. Okay. Because for you to do prediction, you need to hypothesize a relationship. You have to have a hypothesis. Understand? You need a theoretical framework, and then you have to come up with a hypothesis. So, and then you text the hypothesis.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So that's it. Oh, guys.
I think you pushed the recording button.
Okay.